In this video from Otis Lab Press, I will be showing examples of beginner-level book structures that students can use for their projects. The first type of book we'll be talking about is a single-sheet zine. This is one of my favorite book formats because it's really fun and easy to make, but it has a lot of different possibilities. So basically you have a front cover, you have 6 interior pages, a back cover, but then the whole entire book can unfold into sort of like a poster because it's really just made out of one sheet of paper. So this is a really versatile book structure that's used in a lot of different ways. Here's an example just of the pages and how they're laid out, so you can see the orientation in which the printing will work. But the reason why this is so great and popular is that you can really easily reproduce this book affordably and accessibly. So because it's just made on one sheet of paper, you could use 8.5 by 11. I think this one is done with 11 by 17. But basically you can make this book, put it in a Xerox machine, copy it, and fold a bunch of them to create a really accessible edition of books. So that's why a lot of people make it into zines, which are basically mini magazines that are self-published. So here's some examples, and it's really fun to use this on the back as part of your piece. It could also be displayed like this. This is done with a little bit of a thicker paper. These are smaller zines. And we have a tutorial about how to do this on our website, on our YouTube page as well, as part of our Lab Press at Home series. So that's one really great option for a simple book. Another great option for simple bookbinding is pamphlets. So a pamphlet is also very commonly used in zines as well as artist books, and it's basically just several sheets of paper that are folded in half and either sewn or stapled at the spine here. So as I said, you can staple this. This is an example of a pamphlet that has been stapled. We would call that saddle stitch binding. So you have your sheets of paper, fold them in half, and staple in the middle. And we have a machine in the lab that makes this really easy to do, and you can do thicker books using this. So this is a pretty thick cardstock, but the students used our heavy-duty saddle stitch stapler to staple this really thick, really nice Riso printed book. Again, you could do this in our lab. We have a video tutorial about that, and you could also do it easily at home using a stapler. And there's ways to kind of make this a little more upscale. For example, this one is just using one staple for the interior pages, but then they created this sort of dust cover that wraps around, and it's printed on vellum, so it kind of elevates this. Again, you can think about the format. You might have a really long, tall book or a landscape style book. One thing you do need to think about with this is the way that the pages are going to line up when you print it, because you're stacking them together. When you print it, you need to be sure to print the right thing on the front and the back of your pages in order. A good, easy way to do that is in InDesign. You go to print your document and you say print booklet. So you could also make what we call a dummy book, where you kind of fold all the pages together and mock up what's going to go on what. So just make sure you plan so that you don't get your pages out of order. Again, you could stitch this either by hand or by machine. So here's an example of one that has been stitched by hand. You can see there's 3 holes, and in the middle you can see here where they're tied. So that's really nice. And this one again has little pull-outs that sort of kind of elevate it and make it a little more interesting. You can see the stitching here is done on a sewing machine. Just make sure if you're going to do this that you have your machine on the right settings. So you probably want to have the stitches further apart, and you probably want to test this out before doing it on your prints. And I also just want to mention that this can be done with a hardcover. So they have 2 end sheets, and in the center it's the same exact thing as just this. it's sewn, but it could also be stapled. And then they encase it in this hardcover, making it extra nice. Another really popular option is perfect binding. So most commercial books you're going to see are bound this way. Perfect binding means that it's done with glue. So you have your single sheets that are your text block, and they're glued at the spine, and then there's a cover that wraps around. And we have the perfect binding machine in our lab, which you can use if you've been certified on it. We also have a tutorial about how to do this at home using your own tools if you want to work from home or if you haven't been certified on our perfect binding machine. Another really great option that we have is a wire O binding machine and a spiral binding machine or coil binding. So I'm putting these next to each other because they're similar, but they're also very different. So wire O has square holes that go in your pages. The coil is made out of wire, and then it is squished together to enclose your pages. And these coils we have in our lab, and we have the machine for the wire O, but we only have them in black, but we do have them in sizes varying from small to large. So this is a nice option. It allows you to flip the book completely around like that, and it's pretty secure. So now the difference between wire O and coil binding is that the coil here is actually just one circle. So, and it's made out of plastic, and it comes in different colors. So we have these in different colors. We don't really have them in different sizes, but this is a pretty universal size, and you could order your own coils online if you want a different size or a different color. But we have a variety of really fun colors to use for this. So again, the difference is that it's made out of plastic, and it's one continuous coil, whereas this one is a coil that's squished together to be enclosed. And you get circular holes here. And the fact that it's a continuous coil makes it extra sturdy. Nothing is going to fall out of this. So these machines are available in our lab, and you don't need to be certified to use them, but we do have video tutorials about how to use both of these machines that we recommend you watch before you come in to use the equipment. Here is the Explosion book. This is a really fun and really simple pop-up book that we also have a tutorial about on our YouTube and our Instagram. These tend to be smaller because you work with a square sheet of paper, so it's always going to be square. You, of course, can use a larger sheet of paper, but it will have to fold down to a square, and you could make these longer or shorter. I'm not sure how universal it is in terms of content, but if you have a book that this style will work for, go for it. You know, it could be really fun and different, and this is a pretty simple one to make that's also very impressive. Okay, stab stitch binding. This is another very popular binding, but there are some things to be mindful of when doing this binding. So you can see the stitching here, and the stitching is done through the front cover, directly through the cover, as opposed to through the spine. So you know, you have to be interested in this look. There's different kind of patterns you can do for it. This one also counts as a stab stitch binding because it's sewn through the front cover as opposed to through the spine. And this works well if you have thinner paper because it needs to be able to open like this. And this style of binding has a large gutter. What we would call the gutter is this part of the book. So the information that is lost in the center of the book due to its limitations when being opened. So if you choose to do a stab stitch binding, there are a lot of tutorials you can find about this. It's very popular, and it is pretty simple to do. You can also get a little more complicated and do something, you know, something decorative with it. You can do it with a hardcover, but you have to make sure to make a hinge so that it can open like this. But again, if you choose to do this, make sure that you design it with this wide gutter in mind. Okay, one of my all-time favorite bindings is the accordion. You can see why it's called an accordion. It has just one sheet that's folded back and forth to create this sort of concertina effect. And this is great because it can be flipped through like this, and it can be drawn out like that to display it. And there's so many different ways you can go with this. This one has hard covers on the front and the back. This one is shorter. It's only 4 pages, so just folded a few times here, and the front of the paper and the back of the paper is what makes the cover. So it can be as simple as that, or it can be really complex. This is one that has hard covers on the front and the back, and it has some examples of pop-ups you could do. The Accordion's great medium if you want to use pop-ups because it has all of these folds to work with. This is a really great example of a way that an artist has used the accordion and complicated it to make it a little more interesting. So it has this cover that wraps around, then it's attached here and folds out like this, and it's printed on the front and the back. This one is sort of a combination of the pamphlet binding. You can see it has that stitching here, and the accordion. So the first part of the accordion is hand stitched into the cover, but then the rest of it folds out like a normal accordion. So you can sort of think about ways to combine multiple book forms. This is another example of a way you could build upon the accordion book structure. So it has the hard covers, and then the accordion part is what we call an accordion spine. And then you see this stitching into the spine. Again, sort of a combination of accordion and pamphlet allows for this to happen. So you can have little interior fold outs that are attached to the accordion. And this way the accordion becomes more of the spine, and then these fold outs become the pages. So this is similar to a flag book, what we would call a flag book, and this might be an option for you if your project works for it. Again, it has an accordion spine, it has 2 covers, and then basically these flags, these cards here, are just glued onto different parts of that accordion, creating this more sculptural effect, but also allowing for flipping through the pages like this. So there's a lot of different ways you can go with an accordion. And lastly, we're going to look at Flutter Books. So these are also very simple to make, but they're a great option and have a lot of different possibilities. You can see you can flip through it like that, but you could also pull it out to display it like this. It's really cool, making it really sculptural, and it's very simple. All you have are these folded sheets here, and that's it. It's folded, glued at the foredge, and then you can have different ways of having a cover that wraps around. And we have several tutorials about how to make this. Here's some other examples. This is a really kind of small, simple one that I made where it has a little cover that wraps around, and then it can fold out like this, or it can be flipped through like pages. And this is a good example of how you have 2 options here. So I chose not to attach this to the back cover. This one was attached to the front and the back cover, so it was more like that. But if you don't attach it to the back cover, you have something similar to an accordion. What separates this from the accordion is the fact that instead of one long sheet that's folded back and forth, each spread here is its own page, and then they're tipped in at the front here, creating that kind of a shape. Again, this is kind of another way that an artist used the accordion book and complicated it. So this artist, Sarah Nichols, included fold outs in all of the pages here of the Flutter book. So it's just a Flutter book, but each page has a piece that's folded down and it folds out. And there's so many things you can do with this, and you don't have to worry about any complexity with printing because your pages go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they're only printed on one side. You don't need to print on the back side. So this makes it really simple for your pagination, which is what we call that, the order in which your pages are going to be printed out. Thank you for watching. This has been an introduction to some beginner level book structures that students can use. And be sure to check out all our other tutorials, visit our Instagram, our YouTube, our website, and book an appointment to come in and use some of our equipments or contact us on Microsoft Teams.